All right, pleasant good afternoon. We are approaching 4 o'clock on Thursday here at TAPSCon 2023. John Walk, Dan Morgan, One Star Christian Sports Network, and we have as our guest Rodney D'Souza, the Managing Director of the Davis Family Entrepreneur in Residence with Texas Christian University. And we're going to talk a little bit of name, image, and likeness. And it's a storm that's coming our way, yes? Would that be a way to say it?
Yes, definitely a storm coming our way. So name, image, likeness, whether we like it or not, is already a thing, right? It's a thing at the college level. It's a thing at 29 different states across the U.S., and it probably will be a thing in Texas, too, pretty soon. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all students are educated to take advantage of everything that NIL has to offer with an entrepreneurship focus without being taken advantage of by anything else that comes out there. And in my role with TCU, I run the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and the NIL program at TCU is one of our programs that we run under our umbrella.
Was not tracking. I was trying to keep my eye a little bit on vouchers, but were there any bills presented in the recent state legislature related to NIL, and what was the outcome of them?
So there's no outcome yet. There are bills in process. There are certain things that would be interesting if they were passed. So, for example, I believe that the latest bill says that they're looking for students to take advantage of this only after they're 18 years old. Which doesn't work well for high school kids, right, for the most part. So they would already have graduated for the most part. So there's still stuff that's going on with legislation, so we don't know what that looks like yet.
But haven't we moved out of session, though? Or are there things that are being proposed to be presented? Can they present it in special session?
So we don't know about that stuff, right? That's way above our pay grade and things, to know with those things, yeah.
Okay, but so when Aaron was introducing us prior, is that so you've developed a program and basically an awareness for young people to be aware of all of these issues in relationship to name, image, and likeness. And if it were to happen tomorrow, then this program that you're talking about, they'd be able to leverage that to handle that today.
That's right. So the way we've developed the program is focus on entrepreneurship, because we look at the entrepreneurship part of NIL as something you can control, right? It doesn't matter if a collective gives you a deal or not. It doesn't matter what's going on. You can always control your own NIL as an individual. So our focus has been entrepreneurship and how to use the different facets of entrepreneurship to take advantage of NIL. So we taught classes at TCU, and now we are looking to see how we can take that and sort of expand it to the high school level, and not training just students, but also instructors and faculty at the high schools. So train them up like Train the Trainer program, right? So they are the ones in the classroom sort of implementing all these things, and we sort of make sure that the high level stuff is taken care of.
And did I hear correctly that you're part of implementation within TCU? I mean, within the TCU program? I mean, are you engaged with the collectives that are involved with TCU?
No, so we don't engage with the collective. So we are the education arm of the whole thing, right? So we teach classes, we help run workshops around things like how do you develop your brand, right? How do you do your taxes? How do you look at contracts and how do you negotiate those things? Financial literacy is a big thing as well. So, right, we take that side of the equation, not so much the collectives and those kind of things.
So, really, you might have an athlete that's on one of the TCU athletic teams, in your case, that may come to you to take this class to understand what they're being faced with, either whether they're engaged in a collective that is distributing funds, creating opportunities for them, or whether they're engaging outside of that collective on an individual basis,
right?
So that Dan goes down to, goes down to Bush's Fried Chicken and says, "I want to spot,"
Right.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So what we do is we work with our students to help them sort of define what their brand is, right? Like we were talking about previously, every athlete has an expiration date. So we are sort of trying to make sure that student athletes and athletes in general understand that their brand is a lot longer than their expiration date. So how do you develop a brand around who you are and what you stand for that's not just you as an athlete, right? And then once you have that, you can approach brands, or brands start approaching you and saying, how can you be our spokesperson? How can we sort of work together on those things?
And so, and I'm hearing that. So, again, knowing that NIL is not legal in Texas right now, and so we were talking before is that, again, an athlete in Aaron's case at All Saints Episcopal, you might come in and engage in. So, and you're talking financial literacy. I mean, they're obviously not there yet, but how to make sure your Twitter, how to make sure your socials, Instagram,
Yes.
Facebook is in such a way, and the techniques and LinkedIn, all of the social media things, so that they are appealing to organizations that may want to engage at that point in time.
Yes.
Otherwise, even if you don't have NIL in place, you're sharing with them those techniques that they may not be getting. They may not get from mom and dad. They may not
Right.
get even from the school.
Right.
But this is just something extra that they need to be aware of to go out and market themselves in the marketplace.
You are 100%
Okay.
right. So social media is a big thing, right? And a lot of students that we work with, that's how they communicate, and that's how they grow following, and that's how they sort of work with their brands and work with their different folk. To your point, yes, right now at high school level, you cannot do NIL deals, but once you have your social media set up and cleaned up and everything like that, when you hit the college level, you're a lot more appealing to different brands than somebody who has not had that, right? Yes.
Yep.
Rodney, so a lot of people are familiar with NIL, because of like the Bronny James or
Sure.
Bryce Young or Arch Manning or what's the Olivia
Yep.
Dunn from LSU.
Yep.
Millions of dollars deals, but the majority of them, it's not a great big hunk of money right there.
Yes.
And I know a lot of colleges now are starting to do a collective where they pool all the money, and
Right.
everybody gets a piece of that pool.
Right.
So how do you counsel folks on both ends of those spectrums?
Right. So that's a brilliant point. When people think of NIL, that's what comes to mind, right? You've got these 3 or 4 different people who are making significant amount of money, right, doing what they're doing. But if you look at the average deal, for instance, for NIL deals for the brand side of things, it's about $1,500 for student athletes in the U.S., which is not a lot of money, right? Also keep in mind that NIL is a huge portion of what professional athletes actually make, right? So, for example, Michael Jordan, he got paid $93 million when he played, but his sort of NIL portion of that is $3.3 billion, right? Which is a huge, huge difference. You have LeBron James, another example. His earnings as a basketball player is $420 million. It's not insignificant, but it's $420 million. His NIL portion is $1.5 billion, right? So again, huge difference there. So, and a large portion of those deals, both Jordan and LeBron and all those other people, is not just the brand deals that you're talking about, but actual entrepreneurship. They own companies. They invest in companies. They own real estate, right? They own multiple different companies that are not just, I'm a spokesperson for Kia. I'm a spokesperson for XYZ, right? Now, the ones that you talked about are the sort of brand deals, right? You're a spokesperson. You're representing a certain brand. That is one portion of what you think of when you have NIL. You also have PR deals. That is sort of the feel-good stories, right? So you have individuals who brands want to sort of make their spokesperson because of something that they've gone through, right? Some personal stories and things. There's this kid, I forget his name. He plays D1 basketball. He's got one arm, and there are a lot of different companies that want to have him as their PR deal because he's got a really good story behind him, right? So those are different kinds of deals there. Now the entrepreneurial deals are different. You don't even need to be an athlete to have an entrepreneurial deal. We actually have students who work with the athletes in the university and manage their social media for them. So they've started companies where they're managing social media for the athletes. we have students who manage the training sessions and things, right? So we have student athletes who'll say, I'll run a basketball camp, I'll run a baseball camp. Who's going to do the logistics? Not them, right? They'll come,
Right.
they'll show up, and they'll do the training and stuff. Somebody needs to run logistics. So we have non-student athletes who've started companies where they're running logistics for these NIL things. So there's a lot of different entrepreneurial things going on both sides of that equation.
So there you're getting into kind of sports management or space, if you will.
Sure.
As far as managing events and
Sure.
And things like that. You're talking about 29 different states right now allow for high school athletes to engage in NIL deals. What are some of the things that you've been hearing, that you've been seeing that are happening? I mean, again, like Dan was talking about on the collegiate and professional level, you've got, I'm sure you got 5 or 6 at the high school level.
Sure.
Some of these kids that are going like the G League, signing early, those are outliers there. But what are you all hearing that kids at the high school level are doing and engaging NIL?
Sure. So just one example that comes to mind right off the top. New Jersey has NIL at the high school level. There are a couple basketball players there that got deals with Puma, right? And sort of really did a good job for them and everything that they do. The sort of flip side to that is when they go to schools and they want to play for that school, schools have deals with different brands, right? You've got the Nike schools, you've got Adidas schools. There aren't too many Puma schools out there, right? So it sort of limits what you can do as the student athlete because they weren't educated and their parents weren't educated in sort of signing that deal. It's a great deal, right? But it's sort of tunnel vision for that, right? So again, our thing is, how do you educate for the long term? What are some of the things that you need to think about and those kind of things too?
Yeah, I get it from that perspective then.
Yeah.
Is it because, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Puma knowing that?
Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to, for 3 years, we're going to get, and this is senior.
Right.
For 3 years, we'll give you $5,000 a year to wear shoes.
Sure.
But to your point, is that, there's only 5 colleges at the NCAA Division I. This kid has got the ability to play D1, and so there's probably language in that contract that he can't break it,
Sure.
and he can't wear some other shoe, and he's hamstrung. So what you're talking about is the programs that you're developing will earlier educate those to keep from getting into that type of situation.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The-
Just educating people on sort of what's out there, right? Because it's a uncharted space right now, right? And nobody's being nefarious about it, right? It's just that they don't know any better. So it's like, what are things that you need to look out for, right? What are some of the things that you sort of want to put into your contracts and things like that too, just to make sure that it is something that is long term.
Because every athlete's mom or dad can't be Michael Jordan's mom in the movie Air.
Right.
It's dealing with Sonny Vaccaro.
Right.
It is to say, this is how it's going to be, and,
Right.
Well, the other side of it is in the states that don't allow NIL, we have one right here in Texas. Quinn Ewers, quarterback at Carroll, sits out his senior year.
Yep.
So that he could play at Texas. Well, I mean, I'm not a Texas fan, so I'll qualify this by saying, but I mean, I have to say, it doesn't look like his career is going to pan out the way. And you got Arch Manning sitting there with a $3.5 million or $4 million deal as well, and neither one of them really look like right now. It's like that's going to be that great of a deal. Now Arch Manning has a name,
Sure.
His has a family name that will supersede a lot of his performance. But are there kids that are going to get caught? Is part of your deal, not getting caught in that situation? If you don't get to do it while you're in high school, it's important that you finish out your high school years to go on to college. It's
Right.
going to be better for you in your future.
Right. So all we can do is educate them, right? We can't force anything like that. And there's a considerable amount of money being put in front of these kids, right? So it's difficult to say, no, don't, right? But at the same time, it's like, here's all that's out there, right? And this, if you're going to do it, here's a way to do it by taking sort of advantage of things. simple things like taxation, right? Financial literacy, all those kind of things are very sort of important to what we do as well. For simple things like you have a lot of student athletes who'll get paid in swag, right? So it's not real money. It's like, here's, do something and you'll get a pair of sneakers. At the end of the year, they have to pay taxes on that stuff. Not many of them realize that, right? So they don't save money to do that. When it comes time to pay taxes, they're paying taxes on, swag. We've had kids getting taxed on tattoos, right? Because they went and got a tattoo and they were like, I'm going to promote you guys. So, it's like just understanding that kind of stuff so you don't get in trouble with the IRS, right? You have some sort of buffer to pay for your taxes and things like that as well.
Well, one of the real problems we have, at least in the state of Texas, is we don't teach financial literacy hardly at all at the high school level anymore. And I mean, you used to at least have home economics, or you know how to balance a checkbook, or well, kids don't have checkbooks anymore, but I mean, you know how to manage your money to some extent,
right?
And a budget and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so I'm sure that's
yes
a big part of what you guys do.
Very
as
big
well.
part of what we do. Yes.
How? God, I'm sorry, Dan. How have these states? I'm just kind of just curious now. So how have these states that do allow NIL? How do they make sure that eligibility isn't affected?
So that's a very good question. Different states have different versions of NIL, and you also have some states that if you do NIL, you lose your eligibility in certain other states. So if you go to one state to do NIL in a state that it's allowed, you cannot come back to your state and sort of get back into school and stuff. And there have been horror stories of kids jumping ship, moving to different states and taking NIL deals, but when those don't pan out, they come back and they're ineligible. So there's a lot of that stuff going on as well, because it's not like a universal, here's our NIL policy, right? Every state is different. And within states, you have different school districts and systems that are different as well. So certain schools will put limitations on things you can and cannot do when the state doesn't have those limitations. So even within a state, you have certain school things that are like, you can go do this, but you cannot do that, right? So it's the Wild West, to say the least.
So you gave a presentation today to many TAPS coaches and administrators. We're to share this. Is that something? And obviously you have a relationship with All Saints Episcopal. Is this something that if I'm a coach or an administrator watching, is that something that they can reach out to you to have engage with you all to come and if Allie Tennyson at Bishop Lynch wants you to come out and visit with them,
right?
So did they reach out to you
we've been really blessed to have this partnership with Coach Beck and All Saints, because they've been sort of our crash test dummy, right? What is it that we can do at the high school level? What's working and what's not? So the easiest way to sort of understand what's worked for Coach Beck and All Saints would be to reach out to Aaron Beck at All Saints, because then he can talk to the administrators as an administrator, right? He wears multiple hats at that school,
right?
So he looks at it from very different lenses. So he can talk to ADs, he can talk to administrators, he can talk to coaches, because each one of them have their own way of how they look at this, and most importantly, how they're paying for it too, right? So he'd be the ideal person to talk to for administrators.
So kind of be a gatekeeper. If
Yes.
you will. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Rodney, is there anything we missed, or?
No, this has been great, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
I appreciate you stopping by. So again, our guest has been Rodney D'Souza, again the managing director of the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at TCU. So again, thank you again for stopping by.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hey, Dave will be happy we talked to Horn Park. Our other guys at TCU guys.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.